Hi, this is Alex, and if you love music, well, you've come to the right place because we're all about albums. When we look back to the music of the 60s and 70s, we notice, with the exception of maybe Motown, that this is a male-dominated music industry. And I'm not talking about the executives, I'm talking about the bands themselves and the artists. There are an overwhelming number of male versus female type acts. Country music, however, did have a lot of female artists. However, still the focus was on the male country artist. When I look at the Americana genre, early on, the focus was on the male artist. However, maybe due to YouTube and streaming services, the female artist has now become a very important segment of the Americana scene. What I'd like to do is spotlight some of the younger female artists of the folk Americana scene, and also introduce you to some of this amazing talent regardless of genre. As I stated on my previous video dealing with starting an Americana collection, Americana can be boiled down to one word, and that is roots. We're talking about roots music, and this has a very broad definition. And as I also said previously, although the Grammy Awards has made a distinction between folk music and Americana music, I do not hold that as true. I think folk and Americana are all one and the same. Remember, Dylan had an acoustic folk phase as well as an electrified stage, and yet, if you think about it, it's just all music by Bob Dylan. I want to focus on the younger artists because I want to show that Americana is really a mainstream style of music. Also, I think that this group of women are the ones who are going to move Americana to where it will be in the future. It's always fun to find newer young artists that have something to say. As much as I love the Rolling Stones, I have not bought a Rolling Stone album since the 1980s. Now, not to say that history of music isn't important. It's very important, and many of my favorite albums are from the Rolling Stones, but I want to listen today to new artists that have a message to give you and have a fresh new sound. Before I get to my list of the great young Americana artists, I first want to make one observation. That is, it seems to me that these young women have already started pushing Americana along, and I think it's going to be more mainstream because many of these artists are introducing a hint, just a hint, of pop sound into their twangy type Americana music. So let's begin with my list of the young female Americana artists that you should know about, and I will also give you my pick of the one album to start with in your journey through these artists of Americana. First up is Brandy Carlisle. Now, Brandy Carlisle has been around for a while. She's not so young, but she still is contributing and still has a fresh, younger, modern sound. And some of the other artists I'll talk about have a lot to thank Brandy Carlisle for. When she accepted the Grammy Award in 2019, she talked about Americana not just as a genre, but her friends, her community, the people she interacted with on a daily basis. So it meant more to her than just music. She has made some very good to fantastic albums, and the one album I'm going to refer to is the album entitled The Story that came out back in 2007. A couple of the songs did make FM airplay, and you might recognize some of these tunes, but this is a fantastic album from start to finish. In this album, you will hear the wonderful vocal style of Brandy Carlisle and her modern twist on the Americana sound. Now, Brandy Carlisle's debut album, simply entitled Brandy Carlisle, is a true stunner. This album is fabulous from start to finish, and an important album also to consider when listening to Brandy Carlisle. No Americana conversation is complete without talking about the next artist. She is probably the quintessential voice of Americana, and I'm talking of none other than Courtney Marie Andrews. Once you hear her sing, you will know what I mean. She has a beautiful voice with a slight lilt to it, giving her that beautiful Americana sound. This little twang reminds you that she is in the country camp rather than in the pop camp. Although every one of her albums are wonderful and they're all worth listening to and or owning, I do want to talk about one of her albums, and that is the 2016 release entitled Honest Life. Here you will appreciate not only what a good Americana artist she is, but just what a great artist in general Courtney is. Her vocals will really keep you on the edge of your seat and listening quite closely to all her inflections. I never tire of this album. I think this is one of the essential Americana albums. However, if you want to hear something a little bit more modern, something with a little bit of pop sound, you can listen to her latest release called Loose Future. Also quite a good album. Next, I want to introduce you to a very talented and very underappreciated artist, and that is Joan Shelley. Once you listen to Joan Shelley sing, you're going to wonder, what took me so long to find this artist? She is remarkable. Her vocals are quite tender and gentle, and you're going to want to listen very intensely to her music. And the nice thing about her music is it focuses on her vocal with the music as a subtle accompaniment. Now, all of Joan's albums are from very good to great, and she usually has a guitarist who accompanies her by the name of Nathan Salzberg, and some of you may know his name. He is a singer-songwriter on his own and has several solo releases as well. Of all her albums, I would probably recommend her 2017 self-titled release, or the album prior to that release called Over and Even, and that album was released in 2015. If you like live albums, she does have a live album called Live at Baumhard, and unfortunately this is a very hard album to come by. I do not own this album. It was a limited release, and it was mostly bought up by the people who attended the concert. So if you're lucky enough to own a vinyl or CD copy, good for you, and I'm a bit jealous. Then there is the wonderful sound of Allison Pierce. As far as I know, Allison only has one album under her own name, and it came out in 2017 entitled Year of the Rabbit. And I would say without a doubt, this is my favorite Americana album to come out in that year. And I played this album very, very often back in the day. This is still today one of my favorite Americana albums. Next up is an artist I've spoken about previously who I truly love, and that's Sarah Jarosz. And she is a singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, very talented young woman who started her career out as a side member to the touring band of Jimmy Eat World. After that, she moved to the Pacific Northwest, where she also played instruments for the band of Damien Jurado. And he is also a quite wonderful artist, and you should check him out if you don't know about Damien Jurado. Her album Undercurrents, released in 2016, won the Grammy for Best Folk Album, as well as the Best American Roots Performance. Then in 2020, Miss Jarosz released the album World on the Ground, and this won the Grammy for the Best Americana Album. This is the album I do recommend, and it's a wonderful record and deserved to win the Grammy Award. Next, I'd like to speak about Molly Tuttle. She is a very talented musician, and in fact, she won the Bluegrass Music Association Guitar Player of the Year, and not just for women, but for all artists. Miss Tuttle is a singer-songwriter with a very melodic voice. The album I'm recommending by Miss Tuttle is her debut release in 2019 entitled When You're Ready. Molly has her own take on Americana, where she mixes bluegrass with a pop sound to have her own unique view on Americana. Miss Tuttle has recently released a new album entitled City of Gold that has come out in the past few weeks, and it is on the None Such record label, which is quite a well-recorded label. Next up is the Secret Sisters, and the Secret Sisters are Laura and Lydia Rogers from Muscle Shoals, Alabama. The sisters have some of the best harmony vocals you'll ever hear. In fact, I'll compare them very favorably with the Everly Brothers. Now you can listen to their songs He's Fine or Mississippi on their album You Don't Own Me Anymore, which is the album I am recommending by them. These sisters come from a long line of family musicians. They learned to harmonize and to sing a cappella while at the church, and that is the start of many great singing talents, as you know, throughout the decades. Laura, on a whim, went to an audition, and after the audition she was notified to come back to Nashville for a recording session, and Laura invited her sister Lydia to join her, and that was the start of the Secret Sisters. Next we have another sister duo singing act, and they're from Sweden, and they are better known than most of the other artists I'm talking about, and they are Johanna and Clara Soderberg, and they are known as First Aid Kit. The album I'm going to represent is entitled The Lion's Roar, and that came out in 2012. The song on The Lion's Roar entitled Emmylou, which, yes, is singing about Emmylou Harris, and they're doing a thank you to her through this song. This song was nominated by Rolling Stone as one of the top 10 singles to come out in 2012. Their live performances are truly memorable, and you should check them out. The videos that they do performing Dancing Barefoot by Patti Smith and America by Paul Simon is when they were performing those songs live to these artists when they were being presented with the Polar Music Prize award. In 2012, this young duo won 4 Swedish Grammy Awards, including Artist of the Year and Album of the Year. Next up is one of those artists that I think progressed to become an Americana artist. She started out as an indie artist, and her name is Sarah Howells, and she makes up the band Bride. Her debut album, Like an Island, was nominated for the Welsh Music Award, and that album was dealing with being on your own. Miss Howells' follow-up album, entitled The Volume of Things, coming out in 2020, is the album I am recommending. You can see here the move away from a pop sound more to a folk sounding album. As the title suggests, the album deals with the burden of modern times and how she is dealing with it. Now, Sarah is the reverse of many of the Americana artists I talked about, where several of them are moving a little bit more towards a pop sound. She started as an indie artist, moved more towards pop, and is now a folk artist. The album, The Volume of Things, is a wonderful record, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Next up is an American musician who is an original member of the country blues band, the Carolina Chocolate Drops, and I'm talking about Rhiannon Giddens. She is an exceptional singer and has great emotion when she sings. Other than Karen Berquist from Over the Rhine, I would say Miss Giddens is the best live female vocalist I have ever had the privilege of listening to. The album I am recommending by her is the 2015 release, Tomorrow Is My Turn. Next up is Caitlin Rose. She is a young singer-songwriter from Nashville, and she has a wonderful country-style voice, and I mean that in the best possible way. She has released 3 LPs. The first was in 2011 entitled Own Side, followed that up in 2013 by The Stand-In, and finally it took 9 years, but in 2022 released the album Kazimi, as you can see here, and this is the album I am recommending. A truly wonderful album, one that I think you'll really enjoy. Next up is another sister duo act, and that is Lily and Madeline. They have wonderful harmony vocals. Their vocals have a nice ethereal sound to them, and their vocals have a mix of both pop and folk music, very similar to First Aid Kit. Still, their albums have an Americana feel to them, more on the folk side, and more recently, as I have said with other bands, they have drifted a little bit into the pop realm with their release Canterbury Girls coming out in 2019. The album, however, I am recommending by them for that great Americana sound and great harmony vocals is entitled Fumes, coming out in 2014. Next up is Erin Ray, and Erin Ray is actually the name of the band, and the lead singer is named Erin Ray McCaskill, and she has a great folk sounding voice, but has a modern twist to it. And the first time you hear her voice, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is an artist I'm very excited about, and I am going to be following her career closely and look forward to upcoming releases. The album I'm recommending by her is entitled Lighten Up, coming out in 2022. It's on the 30 Tigers label. And for those of you who don't know 30 Tigers, they do have quite a lot of folk Americana acts on their label, and they are usually a very good sounding label. All these albums I presented are great records, and I own all of them and highly recommend all of them. I know I presented a lot of albums, and it's hard to pick, I'm sure, which one to start with, so I'll narrow it down for you. If I was only going to listen to 3 of these albums that I presented, I would start with Courtney Marie Andrews' album, Honest Life. I would also include Sarah Jarosz's album, World on the Ground. And finally, the 2014 release by Lily and Madeline, Fumes. Let me know on the comment sections below if you know any of these artists or you have comments about these artists. Also, if you do listen to these new albums, I'd love to find out what you think of these artists. And now for last video's unknown album. The first unknown album is the great album by Steely Dan entitled Countdown to Ecstasy. This album came out in 1973 on the ABC label. This is the band made up of Donald Fagen and Walter Becker. This album shows a little bit of their jazz influence. That is a genre that they both love, and you will hear some of that on this album. Now, don't be scared by this album. It has a pretty heavy rock guitar sound as well. Now, although many critics will talk about Asia or some of their other albums, to me, this album, their second release, Countdown to Ecstasy, is their finest album. And I say that with a lot of confidence. Now, for those of you out there looking, this is the UHQR release by Analog Productions. It is a box set. It is 2 clear vinyl, 45 RPM versions of the album. This sounds remarkable, and it is way, way better than the original album, which I do own. All the songs on this album are wonderful, and I highly, highly recommend this album. The second unknown album is the album by the Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man, coming out in 1965. This is the first release by the Byrds. Now, the Byrds are a supergroup formed back in LA in 1964. The 5 original members of the Byrds include Roger McGuinn, who is the one member who was with the band throughout the years, as well as Gene Clark, David Crosby, Chris Hillman, and Michael Clark. As you can see by the members of this band, many of them went on to have illustrious careers by themselves as well as with other bands. The Byrds are best known for mixing the folk sound with the pop rock sound of the style like the Beatles, and came up with what people call the folk rock sound. Now, Mr. Tambourine Man, the single, reached #1 in both the United States and the United Kingdom, and many people feel that this is the first folk rock song to hit the airwaves. What many of you may not know is the song Mr. Tambourine Man, which was, by the way, written by Bob Dylan, is a song that was very influential on the album Rubber Soul by the Beatles, and you can hear that in the songs Nowhere Man and If I Needed Someone. And now for this video's unknown album, the first unknown album. Great, hope you got that one. The second unknown album. Great, hope you got that one too. As always, if you think you know the answers, let me know on the comment sections below and I'll let you know how you did. As always, this is Alex with All About Albums. Thanks for listening, have a great day, and remember, keep them spinning.